Obabner? Obabner Wapner? Big Obabna? Obabna Babna? Leave a like. Leave Obabna. Obabna Wapner? Leave a like. Shut the fuck up. Is it true that you can hear everything? Shut the fuck up. Oh, stop. You can hear everything? Shut the fuck up. Oh, stop. You can hear everything? Shut the fuck up. Oh, stop. I mean, a little bit. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's an okay sound. You can't literally hear everything. It has okay noise suppression. Pop out chat. Okay, we're doing gaming question mark. Gaming question mark.
In my therapy work with abused individuals, there was always huge variation in the emotions experienced by different clients. Some felt explosive rage. For others, anger was non-existent. Some clients looked back on their abusive relationships with overwhelming grief. Others viewed them with cold detachment. But one emotion was present in some form in virtually every case. Common as it was, the nature of the emotion itself made it one of the most difficult to discuss, and some individuals worked hard to avoid the subject. Shame. I want to explore some questions about this potent emotion. What are the effects of shame? What kinds of environments?
Wait.
Is the practice
So
of
what?
shame by individuals?
Why is this Buster in the YouTube chat?
How do shame-bound individuals who've become immersed in malignant shame overcome their...
Why does Buster in the YouTube chat? Did no one tell Kale that the YouTube? Did I say YouTube chat? I meant Twitch chat. No one told Kale that the Twitch chat is stinky.
self-loathing. Shame is broadly defined as an uncomfortable feeling caused by an awareness of some personal shortcoming. On the surface, it would seem like a useful, healthy emotion, conducive...
You're gonna be listening to a video about shame. Oh, don't be just love. Oh, don't be just love psychology. Oh my god. You stinky.
Positive social interaction.
About what? About shame?
After all, feeling some discomfort about our transgressions can motivate us to do better. So, what's the problem? To understand the special impact of shame, it can be instructive to look at a closely related emotion. June Tangney and Jessica Tracy explored the relationship between shame and guilt. two members of a group of self-conscious emotions that also includes pride and embarrassment. They note that shame and guilt are frequently mentioned together and characterized as moral emotions that inhibit behavior considered to be antisocial or morally objectionable. In reality, things aren't so straightforward. Shame and guilt have some fun.
Why would I need to learn about shame? I feel it every day. But do you know if it's really shame? Or maybe it is guilt? Or maybe it is cringe? Or maybe it is gaming? Huh? Do you know the details? Or are you just assuming things? Or do you know? Do you know?
Differences that generate very different motivations. For Tangney and Tracy, it was psychologist Helen Block Lewis who captured the distinction.
What the difference? That's what we're listening to. That's what we're gonna be learning.
According to Lewis, guilt involves a negative evaluation of a specific act or behavior, whereas shame goes deeper, involving a negative evaluation of the self. The person is seen as...
Damn. Shame. It's a negative evaluation of yourself. What? Guilt is an evaluation of an action. You see it? It seems like guilt is more constructive.
Is having a defective, inadequate, even corrupt nature. This difference in focus has a big impact on our responses. Tangney and colleagues present a wealth of empirical research showing how targeting the person rather than the act is associated with a range of destructive behaviors and mental health issues. Susceptibility to shame is strongly related to defensive anger and aggression. The aggression could be physical or verbal. It might be displaced, directed to individuals unrelated to the source of the shame.
I'm usually kind of scared about listening to psychological shit on YouTube because ad break. Ad break, by the way. I usually doubt any psychology on YouTube because it can all be pop science or political shit or even evil psychology that is all bullshit. And most psychology shit on YouTube is just someone speaking with like a lot of confidence about things that like maybe sound like your voice so low. I gotta turn up the volume that I hear you using the tablet. My voice is not low. This is actually factually incorrect. I can see the volume scale. This is not an opinion thing. I can see my volume scale going to yellow.
Shame. Anger is also often directed inward on the self, further compounding the problem. In contrast, susceptibility to guilt appears to be unrelated to anger. Where guilt-prone individuals do feel anger, they've been found more likely to handle it constructively, with non-hostile discussion and corrective action. Shame-prone individuals are more likely to try and deny or evade the situation.
One thing, it is true that my mic pickups. Damn. Okay, this is true. I wasn't conscious about this, but it is true that the mic picks up the tablet a lot, like an obnoxious amount. That is true. What can I do about that? Maybe making the microphone closer to me and away from the tablet. But if anyone says that my voice is low, I know you guys are lying. I can tell that's not true.
Whereas guilt-prone individuals are more likely to engage in restorative behavior, including confessions, apologies, and reparations. Jeff Yorman found that shame was associated with unproductive self-rumination. Shame-prone individuals...
It seems like just taking the microphone away from the tablet works a little bit, but it still sounds so much. I don't know why the microphone distinguishes tablet noises for voice. Stump. Microphone. What the heck? Filters. I'm testing. This is so annoying. I don't understand why the microphone decides that this is worth picking up. Now it doesn't even pick up clearly. One. Okay, now it doesn't pick up the tower. One. Okay. Guess I'll keep going with this setup.
Can become absorbed in unfocused, self-critical thoughts, resulting in more psychological distress and less headspace for empathic reflection. Heumann suggested that shame and rumination feed on each other, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Given all the distortions associated with shame, it will come as no surprise that susceptibility to shame is strongly linked to a range of psychological symptoms and disorders, including depression, anxiety, PTSD, eating disorders, substance abuse, self-harming, and suicidal behavior. The evidence is clear. With its focus on a specific act, guilt serves various psychologically adaptive functions, helping to facilitate positive resolution. Meanwhile, with its focus widened to the whole person, shame serves various maladaptive functions, sparking aggressive defenses that block positive resolution and lead to destruction and disorder. Targets of abuse often have a susceptibility to shame actively instilled into them in their earliest years through constant subjection to shaming. This can develop into toxic or malignant shame, where the shame becomes a more or less perpetual state, permeating the target's thoughts, actions, and experiences. For the shame-bound individual, the process of overcoming abuse can feel like an assault course, because even the steps they take towards health can inspire shame. Of the many kinds of manipulations abusers use on their targets, from gaslighting to infantilizing to double binds, shaming is one of the most pernicious. Different abusers will inject different strains of shame into their targets based on their own hang-ups. Some abusers are obsessed with germs and dirt, neatness and order. Some are preoccupied with body image, sexuality, gender roles, social status. But in all cases, the underlying message is the same.
Gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss. I'm the recipient of abuse with microphone. I'm literally being gatekept, I'm being gaslit, I'm being sexually assaulted, I'm being exploded, I'm being too much every day. Too much. I can't take it. I can't take it.
Some abusers convey this message directly, openly telling targets they're worthless, rotten, degraded. Many abusive religious groups pump for this option, teaching targets to grovel to gods and ghosts to forgive them for their wretchedness. A more indirect method is...
Okay. My microphone. Still picking. Doesn't always pick it up, but it's so annoying. I can see it now. I don't know why the back of the microphone picks up so much audio. I don't think I can do it. Filters, expression level. It can. I don't know.
Set impossibly high standards. Targets are often expected to exhibit superhuman qualities like infallibility, omniscience, telepathy. They're expected to know exactly what to do and say at any given moment, and punished when they inevitably fall short. In healthy environments, it's understood that each of us is born fumbling and unprepared into a strange and bewildering world. Mistakes are expected as a natural part of learning to navigate that world and seen as a source of growth. Malignant shaming environments make few allowances for inexperience. Mistakes are taken as proof of innate stupidity, thoughtlessness, or deliberate troublemaking. Instead of growing, the target's world shrinks. Over time, the abuser's message is internalized, changing from "there's something fundamentally wrong with you" into "there's something fundamentally wrong with me." This is where shaming surpasses manipulations like gaslighting and double binds. Shaming
Saying that shaming is even more powerful than gaslighting must be canon in the Mac. One. Okay. Now my microphone is actually not picking up my voice. So fucking being used. One, two. What if no?
is an abuse we're taught to inflict on ourselves. Targets absorb the hypercritical voices of their abusers so that eventually the abusers don't have to say a word. The shame-bound individual is like a fox that's been trained to hunt itself to exhaustion, while the hounds sit back and enjoy the show. What's more, the fox often continues to hunt itself long after the hounds have gone. Unlike gaslighting and double binds, which stop the moment we cut our abusers out of our lives, shame can persist long after we've ditched our abusers, even after their death. I want to look at 5 persistent sources of shame commonly reported by targets of abuse. Many targets feel deeply ashamed for allowing the abuse to happen, even in cases where they were only children facing adult abusers with unfathomable power and resources. Even in cases where they acknowledge that resistance might well have led to more intense abuse, they still blame themselves for not resisting. In a similar vein, some targets feel ashamed for having been part of a malignant group in which they repeatedly witnessed the abuse of others and took no action. Targets sometimes feel ashamed of times when they've hidden from their abusers. Someone I'll call Simon told me he would secretly disconnect his family's telephone on certain nights of the week to avoid phone calls from an abusive friend. He said he was afraid his cowardice would be discovered by his family. Many targets feel ashamed of some of the maladaptive coping techniques they've used to try and temporarily anesthetize their self-loathing, like binging on drugs, food, or alcohol, self-harming, participating in risky sexual encounters, which sometimes go much further than planned. Because the coping technique is in itself a source of shame, it can lead to a self-reinforcing cycle. Shame provokes the coping technique, which in turn provokes more shame. I want to mention one more common source of shame. Some years ago, when I was working at a counselling charity, I saw a client I'll call Troy, who'd written on his application form that he'd recently been ambushed at knife point by 2 muggers. On reading those details, I assumed he'd come to deal with trauma. In fact, he came to deal with shame. When the muggers jumped him from behind, flashing a knife in his face, instinctively, Troy found himself fighting back, as he put it, like a cat on drugs. Within the space of a few seconds,
I'm gonna go watch Doin 2 right now. I hear it is a good. Like it's like the first one was a lot of setup. Seems like did pay off in the, but I wouldn't know. It is good. Hopefully hopefully this movie does very well, so we get back to where like stories that happens. Not Frank. Then it is true that this is also an adaptation. Kinda sucks. The fuck? Restoring my. Okay. I guess my stream is just gonna be the noise from my pen always. An hour.
One of his attackers was immobilized with a broken leg, and the other was concussed into unconsciousness. The emergency services were called, and Troy's attackers were later arrested and charged. Despite assurances from ambulance and police staff that he had no reason to reproach himself for fending off his attackers, Troy became consumed with shame at the injuries he inflicted on them. He replayed the event endlessly, beating himself up for not exercising more self-control. One of the most twisted kinds of shame instilled in targets of abuse is the shame of sticking up for yourself. For some targets, overcoming these 5 sources of shame begins by acknowledging them for what they are: survival behaviors. All of them are classic instinctive responses to persistent threat. We shut down, we hide, we numb ourselves, we lash out. How perverse is it that our abusers throw us into survival mode, and we despise ourselves for trying to survive? In one of my first counselling qualification courses, one of the course leaders, a woman called Celia, conducted a counselling session in front of the class with a volunteer student I'll call Harriet. Harriet spoke openly about her.
Might as well show this. Might as well show the actual. I'm ripping this guy off. This guy is cool. I haven't watched their stuff in probably like months, but I remember him being like solid all around. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all of these videos are actually. I think it is cool.
Shame in tolerating violent abuse from her family throughout her childhood. She said she hated how weak she'd been. Celia commented, "I think that little girl was incredibly strong." Harriet protested, "How can you say that?" Celia said, "Because she made it here to tell the tale." In the tears that followed, a great deal of shame was released. People who make it out of abusive environments sometimes kick themselves for having tolerated things they wouldn't dream of tolerating now. But we can't blame ourselves for knowledge and skills we didn't have back then. That's the mindset of abusive shamers, who expect us to know exactly what to do and say at any given moment. Overcoming shame means letting go of those impossible expectations. I'm pleased to report that both the individuals in the real-life cases I've mentioned overcame their shame. Troy was able to lay the ultimate responsibility for his attacker's injuries where it belonged, on them. They chose to jump a stranger in the street and put him in fear of his life. By creating that volatile situation, they put not only Troy, but themselves at risk. Unfortunately for them, in their case, that risk backfired. Simon's case in particular illustrates an important point. Eventually, Simon ended the friendship. Sometime later, he spoke to his family about the abuse. When he confessed to disconnecting the family phone, far from judging him to be a coward, his family just wished he'd told them sooner, so he wouldn't have had to struggle with it by himself. This highlights the self-defeating nature of shame. Our fear of disapproval inhibits us from testing whether our fear of disapproval is well-founded. Sometimes, keeping shameful secrets just insulates us from support. When we've been taught to feel persistent private shame, to see ourselves as defective, worthless, overcoming that mindset means retraining our brains, unpicking the malignant thinking habits we've acquired. Part of that retraining process is learning to recognize the alien saboteur, the voice of our abusers that we've internalized that masquerade as our own. Instead of giving that voice our mindless reflex agreement, we can learn to view it with mindful, critical distance and reject any bogus sentiments, divorce ourselves from its alien preoccupations and hang-ups. An idea internalized by many targets to varying degrees is that they bear responsibility for everything bad that happens. Pavel had a particularly powerful strain of this one. It was his girlfriend who suggested he tried therapy. She said he was always so hard on himself, and she wondered if he was depressed. Pavel presented as a cheerful, upbeat individual. He joked that it was probably his girlfriend who needed therapy for putting up with him. He asked why his girlfriend might think he was hard on himself. He said she hated how he beat himself up when things went wrong. She was always trying to convince him things weren't his fault, but Pavel said he was bad luck. He joked that he had the Sadim touch, which might...
What do you think the twist is? Think she's evil? Think it's an evil girlfriend? Probably Darth Vader. She's probably like the Galactic Empress.
My confused face prompted him to explain was the Midas touch in reverse. In our sessions, it became clear that this self-image had been drilled into him by his parents. From his earliest years, he was subjected to complaints about how much better their lives would have been without him. He was blamed for their financial...
Yeah, bro. Why is it not picking up? You speak so aggressive. That kind of freaked dude.
struggles, their feuds with relatives, even their physical illness.
I guess it's just gonna be very
Pavel
close.
internalized the
The
idea he was
microphone.
the source of all bad and applied it to his relationships with other people, including his girlfriend.
I guess the twist was the papas and mamas were bad.
He was an affliction, a Jonah.
Oh, hell
For all
no.
his joking, it was a crushing burden. But what was weighing Pavel down had absolutely nothing to do with responsibility. Pavel and I spent some
It
time
was
reflecting
shame.
on the concept of responsibility.
Shame. That's the title. That's what the video is about. It's about shame.
And how it applied in different situations. We started out with examples from his own life, but he found it difficult to be objective. His mind was powerfully geared to hunt for reasons to blame himself and disregard arguments in his defense. So we looked at various hypothetical situations involving other people. For example, a random stranger with no training is put in sole charge of a nuclear power station. If the plant goes into meltdown, should she be held responsible? A museum curator is ordered at gunpoint to open the museum vault and hand over a valuable painting. Should he be held responsible for the theft? In the process of articulating his responses to these and other imaginary examples, Pavel began to dig deep into the concept of responsibility. Over time, he identified a range of factors that would affect how an individual's responsibility was assessed. Factors like knowledge, skill, autonomy, intention, power. He recognized that where these capacities were absent or diminished, responsibility could be reduced or nullified. When the time felt right, I put the following situation to him. A couple decide to have a child. They experience financial struggles, feuds with relatives, and physical illnesses. How responsible is the child? Long pause, then a laugh.
How responsible is the child? Huh? How responsible? Everyone has to answer that.
Then a quiet declaration. I wasn't responsible. In subsequent sessions, Pavel dissected many instances of false blame heaped on him by his parents. He began to see the sheer perversity of their behavior. He recalled an old forgotten memory of a time when his father was driving and took a wrong turn. When Pavel pointed out the mistake, he was scolded and dismissed. Later, when his father had to concede he was lost, he blamed Pavel. If the boy had made himself useful navigating the journey by map instead of just sitting there staring out the window, they'd never have got lost. This is how it went. His parents would shut down his contributions, then blame him for not contributing. With little power comes little responsibility. Pavel's case illustrates some useful points about overcoming misguided private shame. As I've noted, the stimulus that sparks private shame will vary from person to person. In Pavel's case, random misfortunes triggered the feeling, but it could be anything from experiencing sexual desire, to having critical thoughts about a religious or political ideology, to feeling some forbidden emotion, maybe anger or distress. These shame responses are unexamined, automatic, thoughtless. A powerful antidote to an unthinking response is thinking. The more conscious critical thought we apply, the less misguided shame we're likely to feel. And Pavel's case highlights the importance of thinking for yourself. My role in his sessions was not to do all the thinking for him, but to provide a Socratic dialogue, to offer questions to assist him in his thinking. In the building of his thoughts about responsibility, Pavel did his own heavy lifting. Many shame-bound individuals struggle to judge for themselves what's reasonable. Is it okay to think this? Is it okay to feel that? In this state of doubt, there's often a temptation to defer to the judgments of others.
Oh my god.
Others do the thing.
I fixed it. I have a new setup now. My tablet somewhere else. Oh, the pen is not annoying to my. Epic setup update.
Thinking for them. The most face-smacking problem with this is that deferring to the judgment of others is often precisely what leads individuals to become shame-bound. They've deferred to bogus, misguided judgments. If we're struggling to judge for ourselves whether a thought, a feeling, an action is acceptable, deferring to what other people find acceptable will do nothing to enhance our judgment. To do that, we have to develop our own thinking, to become our own Socratic questioner, interrogating our principles, exposing our assumptions, attacking our ideas from all angles to see if they hold up. Then we can make our own confident.
Gotta become a gamer. Just so I hear first. Gotta become shame.
Rational judgments about what's acceptable and let go of our private shame. And something else will happen. We'll be equipped to stand our ground against the group, to resist public shaming.
That's not the end. Oh, no. Not over.
Our experiences of public shame are intimately bound up with some of our most primitive instincts around social membership. When people are found to have gone against the rules of their group, remarkably similar responses are seen across human cultures around the world. Individuals withdraw and attempt to appease the group. They communicate their acceptance that their welfare is now regarded by others as less important, and perform various non-verbal displays of subordination which resemble appeasement gestures found in other primates. They also show higher levels of cooperation. The cross-cultural and, in some cases, cross-species nature of these responses points to a deeply hardwired social mechanism. Whatever kind of group we find ourselves born into, whether it's an enlightened free society or a dogmatic ideological backwater, we absorb its values and fear being discovered transgressing them. This is how the phenomenon of shame feeds into the tyranny of the majority. In families, ideological communities, nations, individuals are trained to feel defective based not on rightness or rationality, but merely on numbers, on what the majority happens to consider acceptable. The prospect of public shaming for perceived transgressions is what confronts people who come out, People who reveal an aspect of themselves that's been unjustly stigmatized within their group. Often, these individuals have
Epic innuendo thing for the Mid-Journey Reddit. Why would you ever? Just leaving this here. So show Mid-Journey an artist's image directly and Mid-Journey will copy it. You're nothing but thieves, nothing. Words can't describe how dehumanizing it is to see my name used 20,000 times in Mid-Journey, my last work, and who I am. Used to meaningless fodder for a commercial image slot machine. No shit, I agree with everyone who's against Mid-Journey. I'm not gonna jump into this topic because it's just me fucking circle jerking about how bad it is.
resolve their feelings of private shame, acknowledging within themselves that they have no reason to feel defective, and in the process of coming out, they deal confidently with attempts to humble them with public shame. But it's worth mentioning.
Back to brain rot at YouTube. We're listening to an interesting video about shame. It is not. It is genuinely interesting. This guy, I don't know his expertise, but he sounds right. He sounds interesting. I don't know.
That for some individuals, things don't go to plan. In the midst of their declaration, they find their previous confidence collapses. They watch themselves apologizing, appeasing, compromising, and accepting inferior status. Later, they wonder what.
Probably reading from the Wikipedia article. Shake my head. I mean, there's a chance that could be the case, but also reading from Wikipedia is not wrong. I agree. A video being completely built from Wikipedia is wrong, as in you didn't check the sources that are in Wikipedia. But like taking information from Wikipedia is not wrong. Didn't you watch the H Bomber guy video? Yeah, I know, Somerton guy. I know what you're referring to. But do not completely dismiss Wikipedia. I remember the script for Illuminati shit was like literally word for word copy paste Wikipedia articles. I get it.
Happened. It felt like they were taken over. And it's possible they were, by the aforementioned human instinct to submit in the face of group disapproval. These hardwired social instincts can have a...
Reading the Wikipedia article aloud word for word is wrong. Yes, if you frame it as a video that you made, yes, without, like, if you say that I'm gonna read the Wikipedia, then it's not wrong. Probably good information. But if you frame it as like, this is the video I wrote, then yeah, it's wrong.
Powerful grip on us. But if we're consciously prepared for them, we can often keep them under control. It's especially easy for instinct to take over when things get aggressive, and in some cases, that instinct is a good thing. In recent years, some people who've shared their coming out experiences reported being physically attacked and having dangerous objects thrown at them.
Wait, what?
Coming out experiences, that instinct, especially easy for instinct to take over when things get aggressive. It felt like they were taken over. What? In the midst of their
coming out,
public shaming for perceived transgressions is what confronts people who come out, people who reveal an aspect of themselves that's been unjustly stigmatized within their group.
It happened to me when I came out as a gamer. This happens every day.
Often, these individuals have resolved their feelings of private shame, acknowledging within themselves that they have no reason to feel defective, and in the process of coming out, they deal confidently with attempts to humble them with public shame. But it's worth mentioning that for some individuals, things don't go to plan. In the midst of their declaration, they find their previous confidence collapses. They watch themselves apologizing, appeasing, compromising, and accepting inferior status. Later, they wonder what...
I gotta make it clear, guys, if any of you is a gamer, you can come out in the stream in my little chat. Welcome, gamers. Don't you guys worry.
Happened. It felt like they were taken over. And it's possible they were, by the aforementioned human instinct to submit in the face of group disapproval. These hardwired social instincts can have a powerful grip on us. But if we're consciously prepared for them, we can often keep them under control. It's especially easy for instinct to take over when things get aggressive, and in some cases, that instinct is a good thing. In recent years, some people who've shared their coming out experiences reported being physically attacked and having
Okay, I would like to get information from this statement. Where are people getting physically attacked for coming out? I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Where is this? I know this literally happens in like Colombia. You know, you can like get fucked up if you say you're gay in some parts, and depending in the situation in Colombia. I wonder if this is like this guy is referring to like a UK thing.
Dangerous objects thrown at them. By who? Their parents.
Oh, okay, that was the information that was missing. I've never seen anything like this. Like a study like chances of you getting physically attacked by your parents for coming out. Interesting.
Some tried to appease them. Some ran out of the house. Later on, some of them were annoyed that they backed down. My response is that I'm glad they made it out in one piece. For me, the pressing issue would be, do people who provoke raw survival instincts deserve any place in your life? Sometimes public shaming can take individuals by surprise, but even though they're unprepared for it, it can really serve to clarify things for them. Some real-life cases. Ruth was born into a religious community in which the women only wore dresses. In her 20s, tired of this sartorial restriction, she started wearing trousers. She knew plenty of women outside of her.
Oh hell no! You got the trousers. Oh hell no! Fuck, they're gonna. Oh hell, might actually.
Community who wore them, and in her mind, it hadn't seemed a big deal. She was
How bad could this be?
shocked to find herself insulted and pathologized by several members of her family and the wider community. Throughout his childhood, Virgil was violently molested. His abuser was an older cousin who had an illness that shortened his life expectancy. To the rest of the family, Virgil's abuser was an innocent, tragic figure, and after his death in his early 20s, the family began to picture him as a guardian angel watching over them. They would call out for his help and thank him when good things happened. Eventually, Virgil told his family what their guardian angel did to him.
Uh-oh.
His revelation was met with a silence that persisted for days. When he pushed for some response, his mother said he'd ruined everything and he should have kept it to himself. Some weeks later, some relatives suggested the abuse was just innocent play. Some suggested Virgil initiated it. He realized they were slowly bringing their guardian angel back to life. In her 30s, Jacqueline cut all contact with her abusive parents and siblings, keeping in touch only with members of the wider family. When a much-loved uncle died, Jacqueline attended the funeral, taking a friend for moral support. Both of them experienced a barrage of insults from Jacqueline's parents and siblings, who told her she should be ashamed to show her face. After the funeral, they continued their abuse.
Wait, what happened?
Both of them experienced a barrage of insults from Jacqueline. Members of the wider family then cut all contact with her abuse. Angel initiated it. He realized they were slowly bringing their guardian angel back to life. In her 30s, Jacqueline cut all contact with her abusive parents and siblings, keeping in touch only with members of the wider family. When a much-loved uncle died, Jacqueline attended the funeral, taking a friend for moral support. Both of them experienced a barrage of insults from Jacqueline's parents and siblings, who told her she should be ashamed to show her face. After the funeral, they continued their abuse, following Jacqueline and her friend back to their hotel. Some months later, her mother died.
Uh-oh.
Jacqueline didn't attend the funeral. Through the wider family grapevine, she heard that her father complained how shameful it was that Jacqueline didn't show her face. But without Jacqueline's presence, he seemed to lose steam and soon fizzled out. For Ruth, her community's attempts to shame her opened her eyes to how they falsely moralized non-moral issues. She'd always seen the practice of wearing dresses as a tradition, but they elevated it to a moral law, which they tried to justify to her with fallacious nonsense about gender and virtue. As Ruth...
I hope anyone who's listening to this video saying they're evil. No. But he is evil generally. And they can go to the no evil camp. 100,000% to 100,000 probably.
Noted it's the role of traditions to serve the people who perform them. not the role of people to serve traditions, and wearing dresses wasn't serving her. The incident brought out a side of her family and community she hadn't seen before, and began an unraveling process that eventually led to her departure. Virgil came to realize his family was more invested in preserving illusions than in his welfare. For all their lip service about the importance of family, about its unbreakable bonds, not a single individual had shown any empathy for the pain and shame he had carried for so many years. Instead, they focused on resuscitating their fantasy image of his abuser as an innocent angel. In contrast to his family, Virgil didn't try to preserve his illusions. He realized how brittle his family was. They couldn't deal with reality and the emotional mess it sometimes brought. He recognized these weren't people he could look to for support, and he drifted into appropriately distant contact. For Jacqueline, it was no surprise that her family criticized her for showing her face, then for not showing her face. It was a perfect example of the no-win double-bind abuse she endured growing up, where the rules could be reversed at any time to put her in the wrong. But being attacked at her uncle's funeral, what struck her for the first time was how desperate for drama her family was. Before she'd cut them out of her life, they'd always been so careful to abuse her in private and maintain a happy family image to the outside world. But the funeral was like a feeding frenzy. They were so hungry for blood, they forgot all about their public image. It was eye-opening. She realized how dependent they'd been on her as a source of drama. It was eye-opening for many members of the wider family too. Some of them reached out to Jacqueline, and her relationships with them took on a whole new life. In families, in communities, in nations, it often takes incidents like these, savage public displays of abusive shaming, to wake people up to what's going on. When we're confronted with public shaming from a group, it's easy for us to merge everyone together in our minds, to see them as a faceless mob. I've been subjected to abusive public shaming twice in my life, both in my teenage years. The first time, like Ruth, Virgil and Jacqueline, it took me by surprise. It was such a surreal Twilight Zone experience. My overriding feeling was morbid fascination. The second time, I was prepared. Both times, I found myself quietly observing these people. I took a long, cold, hard look at each of them. While the behavior of individuals who submit to public shaming from their group is extremely similar, behavior from the actual group itself often shows significant variation. Within my community, some individuals attacked me with genuine rage. Others attacked me with sadistic pleasure, clearly taking amusement in my abuse. Some people ignored me with an attitude of obvious contempt. Others ignored.
Why is he not? What were they shaming him for?
Me with an attitude of apologetic awkwardness, as if they just didn't know what to say. Some individuals would appeal to me to repent. Others would quiz me for hours, trying to find out what had happened to me to steer me off course, and failing to listen to a single word I said. And in some cases, individuals would hop around between different approaches, threatening, then guilt-tripping, then pleading. The phrase, "can't see the forest for the trees," refers to situations where people are so focused on minor details that they fail to see the bigger picture. But sometimes it helps to stay focused on the trees, to see the individuals instead of the group. There's no wisdom of crowds in abusive public shaming, just a collection of confused, misguided, and in some cases, sadistic individuals.
Okay, why didn't he explain what they were shaming him for? Think he was actually in the wrong? He fucked everyone. He actually explained. I don't.
When we've been trained to feel malignant shame, retraining our brains can take time, and it can help to find good supportive communities who reinforce healthy, critical thinking habits. But it's worth noting that sometimes, when we think we've overcome our shame and feel able to stand our ground, it can start creeping back in subtle, insidious ways. Some people who've been historically shamed by their family come to an uneasy truce. Not wanting to lose the person, family members make a superficial show of acceptance, but continue to communicate their discomfort and disapproval in indirect ways. The unspoken bargain is, "We'll tolerate you if you don't talk about that part of you." It's a kind of shaming by stealth. For people who've struggled with shame, it's wise.
Damn. That should be a toxic term. Shaming by stealth.
To think about limiting the time you spend around people who constantly work to re-energize the idea that there's something fundamentally wrong with you.
think it's time to stop using gaslight. I'll be overusing shit. Come on, let's be more toxic.
Wherever you are in your journey, taking your first steps or a fair way along the road, I wish you success in overcoming malignant shame.
Can't really evaluate these videos. I know this guy can only say from the surface. Guy seems to make a lot of sense. Rumination. Oh, I'm gonna ruminate. I think the ADHD thing that I have does help with rumination. But I feel like it does work on me, but it doesn't have the effect that I hear other people describe as like having clarity and shit. Doesn't seem like clarity or like super focus. My ADHD doesn't seem to be fixed that way. I just feel like I have less anxiety. It seems like my ADHD just completely manifested through anxiety. Like I still ruminate, still like get lost in thought, but I just have less anxiety taking ADHD medication. Like I'm not constantly worried about so many things. Maybe it's just a way of where the ADHD manifests. It just seemed like it was felt just like overwhelming anxiety. Wow.
For lots of people who experience abuse and trauma, from religious to occupational to domestic, a common symptom they wrestle with is rumination, perpetually dwelling on their experience. This symptom can last.
Also, maybe he talks about this, but I feel like ruminating. It's like a thing that I really enjoy. I really just like thinking about stupid things. Like maybe that's part of the problem because I genuinely enjoy ruminating. It's not a thing. Maybe I do feel a little bit like I wasted my time afterwards, but it's like an activity. It's like an activity that I do. It's what having fun.
For weeks, months, sometimes years. I want to explore this psychological trap and look at various ways of extracting ourselves from it. In broad terms, rumination is defined as the process of thinking deeply about something or the product of that thought. And in ordinary circumstances, there's no harm in this kind of immersive reflection.
Okay, yeah. I would say most rumination probably not harmful. Well, saying that it is harmful is like being obvious. Like rumination is harmful to the point that it is harmful. You can ruminate as much as you want as long as it's not like harming you, being productive or achieving things that you want.
We use it to acclimatize to new information and situations.
It's like the definition for for addictions is the point. The addiction is the addiction at the point that it is affecting you. Like it is bad at the point that it is bad. That you can be quote quote be addicted to anything, and it is not bad if it's not affecting you being able to live your life.
For example, in bereavement, where thinking intensely and repeatedly about what we've lost allows us to adjust to the new reality. We use rumination to make complicated plans and solve problems. It can help us overcome the errors we often fall into when we rely on more simplistic, emotionally driven reflex thinking.
I want to ruminate.
The biases, the prejudices, the habitual mental shortcuts we take.
I am pro ruminating. This stream, pro ruminating, up to the point where everyone should be.
And distort complex realities. In its positive form, rumination can lead to insight and progress. It's the morbid form that leads to problems, when we find ourselves circling endlessly and unproductively around negative thoughts, images, mistakes, encounters. Like a deeply scratched vinyl record, we skip back to the same position, looping round the same groove, never moving forward.
Is you? Is this you? Is this you?
Frida constantly replays memories of an abusive relationship. She recalls various scenes from the relationship and imagines herself responding differently, shouting back angrily and standing her ground. Whole afternoons, evenings, nights can be swallowed up, internally rehearsing a single incident that lasts barely a minute and that Frida's revisited countless times before. Roger frequently experiences nightmarish thoughts of a magical realm of eternal torture that he was told existed after death. As a child, he was fed vivid fantasies about the terrible punishments awaiting people there, like being starved and taunted with food they couldn't reach, or being made to jump off high cliffs, then having their smashed bodies restored just so they could jump again forever.
Literally. I'd be jumping.
Roger was told that he was born with a sick nature and deserved this torture, and that his only hope of escaping it was to beg forgiveness for his imperfect thoughts and imperfect actions. Only after his death would he learn if he'd done enough grovelling. Since childhood, Rogers struggled to meet the paralyzing expectations imposed on him, brooding incessantly on his shortcomings, obsessing over possible negative consequences to his actions, fearing the forbidden thoughts that could flash uninvited into consciousness at any moment. Joni lives far away from her abusive father. That distance and her hectic work life have given her a plausible excuse to minimize contact. She only sees him at large family events where she can avoid being alone with him. The one form of contact she still struggles with are the letters they continue to send each other. Seeing one of his arrive, her body will flood with adrenaline. She'll open it with shaking hands. Reading it, the world will disappear. Nothing else will exist but his words, which will seesaw between pathos and unbridled persecution. One moment piling on frailty and vulnerability with a trowel, the next firing savage accusations at Joni, scapegoating her for his problems. The letter will preoccupy her for days. These ruminations leave Joni, Frida, and Roger feeling churned up, disconnected from their...
Honestly, Johnny, what's up, Parker? Female. I don't think I've ever associated Johnny.
lives.
That's what I've gotten so far from this.
And stuck firmly in the past. The irony is that for all three of them, rumination began as a coping strategy. For many people, rumination seems to offer some kind of comfort at first. For Roger, who had experienced huge spikes of panic and anxiety in response to some perceived shortcoming, rumination would initially have a dampening effect on his emotions. As punishing as it felt, dwelling on thoughts of worthlessness gave him a degree of psychological shelter from the sharper feelings, But eventually, raw from his compulsive mental self-flagellation, he would trade anxiety for depression. For Frida, who'd felt like a powerless doormat in her past relationship, reimagining herself as the angry victor made her feel powerful for a while. The anger was intoxicating and addictive, and she would rehearse her fantasies over and over to sustain the high. As she became aware of the hours slipping by, she'd start promising herself the next repetition would be the last, and she would repeatedly break that promise. Unable to stop herself, she would gradually succumb to feelings of intense powerlessness.
Barbados. Very true. No. Why is that not appearing in my stream? Wait, did I miss that? Did I miss that chat? It's been so long that it's not in my stream. How you doing, Shabno? What are you up to? We're listening to an epic. Wait. My chat is not appearing in the screen. Not that. Hold on. Bro, what the hell? Doing good, I just pooped. Wait. Why's the chat not showing? I'm so angry, bro. Good that you're doing good. You're listening to a little psychology video, I guess. Great. My stream should be my chat on stream. I guess it's not.
For Joni, who would feel immobilized by her father's letters, rumination would initially offer her an illusion of hope that maybe this time she'd think of a game-changing response that would set them on a different track. But for every idea that came to mind, she'd see how he could twist it against her. She knew how a single innocent word could be loaded with false poison. Slowly, exhausted from futile overthinking, she would sink into despair. Many abused and traumatized individuals intuitively believe rumination is somehow helping them cope, but the evidence points in the opposite direction. Rumination is often the gateway to much bigger problems.
It is working. There's my chat.
A substantial body of research suggests that, far from doing any good, rumination plays a significant role in both the onset and the maintenance of various mood-related problems involving anxiety, stress, compulsions, and depression. Studies have highlighted some of the specific features of rumination that pull us down these pathological paths. Investigating the role of rumination in post-traumatic stress disorder, Tanya Michael and colleagues note that patients often focus on open-ended, unresolvable why and what if types of questions, instead of the actual traumatic experience. Edward Watkins and colleagues have reported similar findings in the areas of anxiety, depression, and impulsive behaviors. They found a significant determining factor in the experience of these problems was whether the individual engaged in concrete or abstract rumination. Concrete rumination involves gathering clear, discernible details, observable facts, quantifiable evidence. We confine ourselves to what actually happened. With abstract rumination, we drift away from facts and start contemplating questions that have no definitive answers. We become preoccupied with possibilities, possible meanings, possible motives, possible consequences. The possibilities are endless and debilitating. Concrete rumination addresses the specific context of a situation.
Man, I be doing abstract rumination 24/7. I be abstracting these motherfuckers every day. What the hell?
If we fail a task, we try to identify the specific factors that led to that particular failure. By doing that, we get the chance to learn from it and move on. Abstract rumination works in the opposite direction. removing context and distorting information into broad generalizations. If we fail a task, we generalize it into a personality trait. We become a failure. We can't do anything right. We might also apply generalizations to other people. If friends are unable to fit in with our plans, perhaps because they're dealing with their own personal demands or struggles, we dismiss that context and label them selfish and uncaring. Abstract rumination globalizes our negative experiences.
Abstract. That's what I.
We convince ourselves that something that happened once will always be the case, and has always been the case. These distortions prevent us from learning and leave us with a sense of hopelessness. Unlike the more systematic focus seen in concrete rumination, with abstract rumination is often a haphazard butterfly focus. Individuals hop around from thought to thought, from memory to memory, in a disorganized way, never stopping long enough to see anything through to the point of resolution. Because of this vague processing, past experiences of significantly different natures get blurred together into false patterns. Eventually, individuals become overloaded with unresolved thoughts and feelings. Abstract rumination magnifies and prolongs negative states. Like a black hole, it consumes vast amounts of energy and offers no light, just an expanding sense of darkness. To combat abstract rumination, we need to put our thoughts in their proper place. Even when we're not ruminating, we often give our thoughts quite staggering power and control over us. As children, we're often taught to view our thoughts as reflections of who we are. We learn to equate our thoughts with our identity. Even the most random notions that pop into our heads feel like a comment on our deepest self. If uncharitable thoughts cross our minds, it means we're wicked, even if we never act on them. Some religious groups push this misconception further with the concept of thought crime. Merely thinking about doing something becomes the same as doing it. Oddly, this only seems to apply to bad thoughts. There's no positive equivalent of thought heroism for good thought.
True. Oh my god. Epic. Like it. Oh, that
Fantasizing about giving vast amounts of money to charity isn't considered the same as doing it. Equating thoughts with actions gives them a completely fraudulent power status. The concept of magical wishes elevates that status further. Now, our thoughts make things happen. Magical wishes are a source of false hope and often great anguish. Sometimes.
Is that a dinosaur? More like a big lizard. Aren't dinosaurs like more related to chickens than to lizards? This is more like in the lizard family. Not so much chicken.
In a moment of anger, we might
This is
wish
like a
for something
Komodo
bad.
dragon.
When our anger passes, instead of viewing our wish as a momentary expression of mental frustration, we worry it's had some physical effect on the universe. In these and other ways, we let our thoughts push us all out of shape. Breaking the powerful emotional hold our thoughts have over us means changing our relationship to thinking. The concept of distancing refers to the exercise of standing back from our thoughts and viewing them from a detached perspective. John Powers and Kevin LeBar noted various kinds of distancing. They used the example of feeling hurt by a criticism from a co-worker. We could use objective distancing, imagining how the criticism might be viewed by a neutral third party. Temporal distancing involves imagining the criticism happened years ago. With hypothetical distancing, we'd imagine the incident was a theoretical situation instead of a real one. Distancing removes us from the emotional impulses of the moment that can distort and block our processing, and allows us to consider different responses. As we exercise more detachment from our thoughts, we can exercise more choice over which thoughts we engage with. When thoughts pop into our heads, we often automatically give them our immediate attention. If people turned up at our house uninvited, we wouldn't automatically let them in. We'd ask ourselves, is it a convenient time for us? What are these people here for? Is it pleasure, business, some emergency? We'd decide whether or not we wanted to invite them in. Thoughts are like guests in the houses of our minds. We can choose which ones we open our doors to and which ones we decline to entertain. Just like human visitors who refuse to take no for an answer, we might find that some negative thoughts persist in trying to push their way in and get our attention. In tackling them, it's important to recognize the difference between resisting them and dismissing them. There might be a natural temptation to try and expel persistent thoughts from our minds by force.
That's giving them shit. My bad. Don't keep them
To try and lock them out with
Don't even acknowledge fuckers.
sheer willpower. When we do this, we create an internal conflict that sets us up for failure and frustration. If someone says, don't think of a chair, what are you most likely to think of?
Yeah.
When we try not to think of something, we're asking some part of our brain to keep track of the thing we don't want to keep track of. It's like handcuffing ourselves to something, then trying to run away from it. The more defenses we put up, the more frustrated we get when the thought continues to break through them, the more power we give the thought over us. We drift into a fearful position, dreading its return. In contrast, when we dismiss a thought, instead of trying to block it out by force, we accept that the thought exists and simply choose not to give it any energy. Some people find it useful at the start to speak directly to the thought, to say something like, I acknowledge your existence, but I have no use for you. Or, I know you'd like some of my time, but not today.
I think we should all ask thoughts. Simple question.
Because we're not working against ourselves, we preserve internal harmony. Because the persistent thought no longer arouses anxiety or frustration, it loses power, and we maintain an emotionally neutral position. Eventually, starved of attention, the uninvited thought will fade away, and we won't even notice. Recognizing that we can choose which thoughts we give our attention to means we always have the option to simply disengage from any persistent negative thought at any time and stop rumination in its tracks. Building on that, I want to look at some ways we can help to permanently uproot negative thoughts and restore the balance that rumination disrupted. In some cases of rumination, our thoughts don't correspond.
Oh, I really like the silly, weird music. Which one?
In some cases of rumination, our thoughts don't correspond to any real problem. We're wrestling with an illusion. We can end this kind of rumination permanently by debunking the hollow idea or belief that's kept us stuck. This involves cultivating our inner lawyer and shifting from abstract to concrete processing. Roger was tormented by the possibility of a magical realm of eternal torment. His indoctrinators had injected him with an unanswerable question, a torturous what if. When zealots ply us with horrifying magical what ifs, we need to be very clear about what they're doing. They're trying to plant an anxiety inside us that we can't resolve. When we start down the path of what ifs, there's no end to the available horror. Whatever nightmare possibility we imagine, we can always imagine something worse. We can always add more horror. The fear we feel contemplating those what ifs isn't a response to any real danger. It's a response to our own imagination. Roger's recovery from rumination began when he reined in his imagination and shifted his focus to discernible details and identifiable facts when he changed the what if into a what is. The fact was, his indoctrinators had never offered any persuasive evidence for a single one of their claims. They'd simply subjected him to magical fear-mongering, let his mind run wild, and in his terror he'd surrendered his rationality. Now, with rationality restored, Roger's inner lawyer dismissed their case on the grounds of total lack of evidence. While Roger's rumination was ultimately based on an illusion, for many others, the focus of their rumination is very tangible, like Joni's father. Sometimes we get stuck ruminating on a problem because we keep using the same fixed approach. We need to reframe the picture, view it from another angle. As noted before, with abstract ruminations, we're often viewing situations through a distorting lens of broad generalizations when we need to be looking at specific contexts. In Joni's case, she assumed everyone was fundamentally amenable to reason, and as long as she continued to view her father from that fixed angle, she continued to exhaust herself trying to reason with him. Her rumination ended when she allowed herself to view him from a different angle, as someone who wasn't open to reason. From there, everything fell into place. Abusers come in a variety of forms. Some act like 5-year-olds, often because in some important developmental terms, that's what they are, children. Some abusers are like histrionic actors, generating endless melodramas and casting themselves in the starring role, often as some noble, unappreciated victim. Joni realized this was what her father was doing. He had no interest in listening to reason. He was focused purely on hunting for grievances to create his dramas. When Joni recognized this, she stopped taking his letters seriously. Whenever they arrived, she would read them aloud in the style they were written, like a Shakespearean tragedy. Instead of a source of stress, they became a source of entertainment. She continued to write back occasionally, but kept her reply.
True power, Selena. Really be. Really.
Is brief and wasted no unnecessary thought on them. When we get stuck in one perspective, seeing things from another angle can be a transformative experience. Another way to step out of rumination is to give our thoughts and feelings some external expression. Many writers say they can never discuss a project with anyone until it's completed. Talking about it before it's done takes away the drive to see the project through.
True!
They no longer feel the need to tell the story, because by sharing it with someone, it feels like it's already been told.
Ooh.
In the same way, the drive to ruminate often subsides when we find some way to get our thoughts out of our heads where they just go in circles and give them some external expression. There are many ways to do this. Keeping journals, using some creative medium like painting or music. Some people use what's called the empty chair technique. They imagine the person they're ruminating about sitting in front of them in an empty chair and say whatever they need to say. For some targets of abuse, writing letters to their abusers really purges their minds of a lot of pent-up material. For people who do choose to write letters, a word of caution: don't ever send them. It's not about engaging with the abuser. It's just about releasing our thoughts. Some people burn or shred their letters. Some post them back to themselves. Whatever works for you. It's worth saying something here about expressing anger. Anger is an important and valuable emotion. It can give us strength and motivation to combat real abuse. And sometimes we can lose ourselves in it. Frida's angry reinventions of past scenes with her abuser made her feel strong, but kept her from moving forward. Her anger made it easy for her to see all her problems as someone else's fault. It also prevented her from recognizing and processing the softer feelings that her anger was covering. feelings of hurt and vulnerability. It was when Frida was finally able to express her full range of feelings that she began to free herself from the past. Activity can be a great preventative measure against rumination, not necessarily in the way we might intuitively think. Some people use activity as a distraction technique, but this doesn't always help. Because we're using activity as a kind of resistance, an attempt to push thoughts away, it can end up arousing more anxiety. Activity helps to restore balance to our lives. Rumination can lead to prolonged periods of inactivity. Preoccupied in our thoughts, we put off social engagements, we fail to plan recharging breaks, we neglect ourselves. We stop doing the things that might help to lift us out of our mood. As days of inactivity begin to mount up, our rumination becomes self-feeding. All we have to look back on are days of unproductive thought. Activity helps to break up that self-reinforcing pattern. It gives our days distinctive texture and stimulates our thinking in other areas. Again, a word of caution. When we're starting to re-engage with activities after long periods of rumination, it's easy to fall into self-defeating internal dialogues. We might think to ourselves, this used to be more fun. Why am I not enjoying this as much as I used to? Instead of making negative comparisons with the past, just focus on what the activity is giving you right now. Which brings me, finally, to mindfulness, a state of focus on the present moment. Mindfulness is about becoming aware of the here and now, observing our thoughts and our sensory experience in a state of detached curiosity. Instead of becoming entangled and defined by our thoughts and emotions, we watch them come and go without attachment. We view them as the fleeting experiences they are. If we find ourselves going off into the past or the future, we just notice that that's happened and bring ourselves back to the present. If we become aware of any critical inner voices telling us we're doing a bad job of this mindfulness stuff, again, we notice it without engaging with it. Through mindfulness, we can learn to direct our attention purposefully and calmly, instead of allowing ourselves to be yanked around passively by random butterfly thoughts and feelings. Research has shown that regular mindfulness exercises can have a huge positive impact on rumination and mood disorders. Of course, there'll be times in all of our lives when we have to face painful thoughts and feelings, times of conflict and abuse, times of loss and bereavement, and allowing ourselves to feel the pain of those moments is an important part of processing them. But if we find ourselves descending into downward spirals of morbid, unproductive thought, there are measures we can take, do's and don'ts, to halt and reverse that descent and overcome rumination.
Wow! Is it over? I have to work on Blender. I got a meeting. Also go out. I gotta do green chai. Alright, I'll be going now. Very short. Thanks everyone. Very short. Very cringe. Very poopy stream. Abstractly. gamer.